Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly Storybook Brawl podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best Storybook player who agreed to make a podcast with me. It's Sythesys! Sith, how's it going?
Yeah, good. It's been an exciting week for Storybook. You know, we've had some pretty big shake-ups every patch, but this one has really had a big impact, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, this patch has really done a number on me, to be honest. It's been a rough week in the Storybook queues from the Jethro camp. So let's kick this week off with some of that, I suppose. What are your stats like for the last 7 days?
So I've only played about 40 games, but my average placement is 3.225, which is significantly below my average for the rest of the month. Got 17 crowns and 26 top fours.
That is down on where you were last week, but it's still above me. I've met 55 games in the last 7 days, so that's based on when we're recording. That's since the update. With 35 top fours, 12 crowns, average placement of 3.8.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is down where I was in October. So yeah, it's not that long since I was 3.78 all the time. Part of my theory for why my stats are so far down is that with the update, which we're going through this week, a lot of the heroes have been flattened. And I think a lot of the advantage I had over a lobby was in choosing the correct heroes. Spoilers, we're not going through the top 10 this week, because I just haven't played with any of them more than 5 times.
Yeah, I think that is true for me as well. I had these really safe comfort picks of like, these are the top 5 S tier heroes. When I pick these, my average placement is like 2. These are extremely strong and I get free wins. And there's only like one hero where I think that's even true anymore, and which we'll get to, I'm sure. But that is, the previous meta took away Adventurer, and that let the whole kind of core of the accelerated mid game went away. But the good heroes were still the good heroes. Here, the units I'm playing haven't changed a huge amount, but man, the hero selection phase, I am lost, and I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's overall it's a patch I think we're both really happy with. I like having more interesting decisions in my games. I just wish I was better at making them already. And yeah, a big shake-up is great. So for this week's show, we've got a pack show for you guys this week. We are going to try and go through every single one of the changes to the Brawl so that you're prepared, and talk about our thoughts, how we've been finding them, and what's good, what's bad from the last 7 days.
Yep.
So we're kicking things off with a brand new hero. This is Apocalypse. Apocalypse, you start the game at 50 life, so that's 10 more life points than normal. And as soon as you reach level 6, all of your characters go away and you get a random board of 7 level 6 characters. You don't get any triples along with that. So they're 7, but the most you can get of 1 is a pair.
Nope, that is not true. You can't even get pairs. They are all individual random units.
You get 7? And you only get 1 of each. How many tier 6s even are there?
There's 15 tier 6 characters. So you're getting about half of them every time. This obviously usually isn't a composition, but tier 6 units are pretty good. I don't want to say that average stats are 20-20, but there are a bunch of 20-20s in there. And if you get 3 good units, 3 evil units, you can pivot in either direction. Like, you'll be kind of weak on the exact turn you hit 6, but it's not that difficult to turn that into something really quite strong. The only real miss is Lordy, who is a 7/7 with no synergy with any of the other units, and sometimes Storm King is quite small. But otherwise, I've been having a really good time with Apocalypse. I've been taking him over every other hero, mostly so I can learn him. But my average stats are 2.4. He's one of my top heroes this week. I think he's really strong.
I agree that Apocalypse is really strong. I've taken them 7 times in the last week, and 6 of those were top 4s. I found it, when I read the hero, I was like, okay, this is going to be a challenge to get to level 6. You've got no hero power until then, and I was assuming that the early game would be the early game from the last meta, that people would be killing each other with Nut Loki starts and waddles and what have you. And in fact, I think the game generally, the early game is a little bit slower, and it's possible to get to tier 6 as Apocalypse and have 38 life left over. And that's good. That's a powerful position to be in.
Yeah. There are a few things with Apocalypse worth noting that really help with this that aren't obvious on first glance. Number one, most of the time during tier 5, you're trying quite hard to set yourself up for when you hit tier 6. You're going either I'm going good or I'm going evil. I'm preparing for good boys. I'm preparing for pumpkins. Maybe I'm preparing for trees or whatever. You're trying to set up. You don't have to do that at all. You get to aggressively buy XP, and once I hit 5.1, I'm not buying units. I am rolling and buying XP only, because the power spike when you hit 6 is so huge, and you really want to do it on your own turn. That's, I think, the most important thing in the Apocalypse. Naturally, fighting on 5.2 experience and starting a turn with 12 gold, triggering your hero power, is awful. What you want to do is to be able to sell your entire board and your hand, buy a 5 gold XP spell or whatever, and still have 17 gold left to spend on fixing your comp.
Having 17 gold plus 7 units for free is a powerful position to be in when you're starting level 6. And I haven't found it unlikely that you find that XP spell. If you start hunting for it on 5.1 and start doom rolling looking for the XP spell, it's completely possible to find.
Absolutely, there are 3 of them.
The only unit I buy at that point in the game, not on 5.2, but on 5 and 5.1 is Nian.
Yes.
And if I don't have all the treasures, because you get to carry any treasures over with you into level 6, and that can really help your comp out if you have a summoning portal or a sort of fire and ice.
Absolutely. Yes, you should definitely be pursuing treasures throughout the game as Apocalypse. I think any starting 6 with no treasures and a bunch of random units, 2020s won't get you there for long unless you're really ahead of the curve. It doesn't take much treasure to make 2020s into much, much better than that. So yeah, Apocalypse good. I look forward to seeing how he goes. As with a lot of random effects, you're always scared of low rolling. I don't think there's really a low roll. It's so difficult to have nothing to work with. I think the hero is genuinely pretty powerful.
Given that you get 50% of the units and they're all different to each other, the low roll sounds really unlikely. I'm not even sure what it would look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you've got, at minimum, 12 gold and you're rolling the shop, you're going to find those pairs or the synergy thing to go with it. Like you say, Lordy is bad, but if I've got a Lordy in hand and I see one in the shop, that's enough to make me take every dwarf I see.
Sure, you can certainly try that. It's not the tier 6 comps of choice.
Have you never moved into dwarves off nothing but 2 Lordies?
No, I must say, that's not something I've done.
Okay, that's... Last time I did that, I won the lobby. I felt good about it.
Cool. That's Apocalypse.
Our other new addition to the game is a treasure at tier 5. This is the 9th book of Merlin. It says, your mages have last breath, cast a random spell.
Yeah, mages are an interesting spell, in part because they're not actually a very supported tribe. Like, before this, the only thing that rewarded a unit for being a mage at all was Aeon, and even then, that wasn't a huge... I mean, Aeon is a quite powerful unit, but it wasn't a huge draw to being a mage. Mostly, mage was just a tag to let you know this unit cares about spells. And it happens that some of the buff units are also mages, but don't think about it. Now, Book of Merlin is a really quite powerful payoff, for sure. Like, the number of spells you cast each turn mean that things like Animal Familiar and Storm King get obscenely large. Like, rather than casting 1 spell a turn, you're casting, 10 spells a turn or something. It is incredible how quickly your Storm King can ramp up if you've had Book of Merlin for any time at all. It's a hard treasure to take. I think that's the main problem with it. If I'm dedicated Hatball wizards, mages already, cool. If I triple my Aeons and happen to find this, awesome. But the rest of the time, I can't take it with only 1 or 2 mages in my comp most of the time. That's not really very strong.
And we can't take it and then transition. If all we've got is a couple of Sporkos in the back line or what have you, you can't then say, oh, now I'm ready to take Storm Kings at 6. Because if you're not dedicated to it, there's nowhere to go. You haven't got that previous support.
Yeah, for sure. It's without Hatball, without being able to cast a bunch of spells on your own turn as well, it is hard to get the level of scaling you need to kick off most mages. I like it. I think it's cool. I think it's flashy. You get a lot of ties. I think that's one thing that's worth mentioning. Very often, you will, as your last unit dies, deal 30 to their last unit, and the fight will be a tie. And yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's nice to have another mage's payoff. It's a little narrow.
Yeah, it's very narrow, and it's very powerful when it gets there. When you get there and have the mages, Because what you've said about it growing your Storm Kings and your Animal Familiars, that would be true if it was casting the worst spell in the game. If it was casting, like, you gain 1 life, and obviously that would scale really weirdly. What's the worst non-targeted spell in the game?
Non-targeted. Deal 1 to everything, probably.
Sure. Yeah, but again, that would scale so weirdly if you were playing it in a game.
Sure.
If it was always casting a blank text spell, it just said this counts as you casting a spell or whatever, that would still be scaling everything, it'd be triggering your hero power as Merlin, it'd be doing a lot of what we want it to do, but it's not doing that, it's doing monster books. It's shriveling things, it's dealing 30 damage on the other side of the battlefield. It's having a really powerful in-game effect on top of that scaling. And that makes it probably the most powerful tier 5 treasure, though it takes work to make it that good.
Yeah, it is interesting because I'm not taking it like it's the best tier 5 treasure, certainly. But yes, it's I guess it's a like round table in that way, right? Where it's, an extremely, like, it's a payoff for a very specific archetype and basically awful otherwise. But round table is worth moving in on. So maybe this is too, and I'm underrating it, but we'll see.
I've been forcing mages a bit recently. As you might be able to tell from my stats. I've been trying to take it at every opportunity because I just kept losing to it and being like, I think this thing is really, really powerful. And I think there's probably a middle ground somewhere where you're open to the possibility of mages at the point that you're doubling Neans. And you're like, oh, I've been offered Book of Merlin. That means I can move into this now.
Yeah, I'm probably overly hesitant on that at the moment. I think it is worth keeping an eye out for. But yeah, I think you're right. That might be correct.
Onward to cuts. Top of the list, we have Princess P. Princess P used to be a princess that, as long as it was getting supported, it got +4/+4 for each unit supporting it. It was a tier 4 creature. I have no recollection of ever taking or playing it.
I have certainly taken or played it. I've never liked it. It's obviously, like, it didn't have any, it wasn't good with the rest of the princesses because none of them were supports. Even if you were Miri, you didn't want it. It wasn't actually good on the heroes you'd expect it to be good on, like Pup, because I want to be supporting units that actually double down on my supports, either with summons or with ranged. And it being just kind of big, it wasn't that big. I wouldn't have called it the worst unit in the game, but it would have been top 3 worst units. And so it's gone. I'm glad it's gone.
It was definitely the worst 4-drop in the game.
Oh, Lady of the Lake. But yeah.
So I'm going to sit here and root for Lady of the Lake until I die.
Okay.
It's ranged. It's better than Baby Tree. And then on the cutting block, we have a pair of Slay cards. We've got a creature in Grimsoul. This was the 4-mana 5/1? 4/1?
It's gone. I've forgotten its stats already.
Exactly. This is the 4-drop that Last Breath to trigger one of your Slay abilities. And then Harvest Moon, which is the tier 5 treasure that gave all your Slays attacks twice.
Yeah, so this has gutted Slay pretty hard. Like, Slay is no longer a strategy that I have seen in basically any of my games. I don't think Slay individually units are unplayable. Chupacabra is still pretty strong, but you really can't go all in on it. It is, Baba Yaga is probably the unit that I've bought much, much less. As a result, because I'm just not willing to double down on my unit that I'm probably, I have no intention of keeping long term. I'm just playing it because it's an okay unit from tier 4. Yeah, I think this is really, really gutted Slay. Maybe even a little hard. Harvest Moon, I think, was problematic. The ability to do in Slay, it was mostly fine. It was when you were doing it with River Wish Mermaid plus Cupids and Medusas that was kind of unacceptable. That felt really bad to lose to, and you couldn't do anything because they attacked first and 4 of your units were dead to Cupid, and it was like, oh, okay.
I mean, that's a huge part of what was wrong with OG Sadrak as well, right? Is that you didn't even need the River Wish Mermaid. It was just everything in my front row has double attacks. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And I understand Grimsoul being problematic as well. Anything that can trigger a death rattle and give you permanent scaling is maybe a problem. I don't know what they can do to bring Slay back. I quite like the way Slay played in general. The kind of risky. It made each fight really exciting to watch. Will I get a Slay? Will my units cycle around and I'll get a second Slay? That would be sick. I kind of liked it. Whatever was happening, the combination of Grimsoul's, Chupacabras, and Baba Yagas was too good. I can't play any of these units doesn't feel great. But I'm okay with forgetting about Slay for a bit, and then maybe I'll come back in a few patches.
Yeah, I have tried going all in on Slay since this patch, and it does not work. It's a shame that the creatures just feel way too small now. Now that Chupacabra doesn't have Grimsoul to reliably mean it's getting +2/+2 around, it's just too small by the time you hit tier 5.
Yeah,
And you really need some help, some support to get it there.
yeah. In fact, I would say Bad Moon is basically the only time I would take Slay units now. Bad Moon basically does let you double down on that scaling, and is still, like, on paper certainly, a really strong treasure.
That's a good shout. I should try out Bad Moon Slave.
And special shout out to Trophy Hunter, just absolutely massacred by the removal of Grimsoul, probably the worst hero in the game now. No actual changes to the character, but god, they needed Grimsoul, and it's gone.
Moving on from ads and cuts, we're now going through the nerfs next. So these are the things in the game that have got distinctly worse since the update. Top of the list is the podcast's favourite hero, Miri.
Used to be. Oh, man. No, I still think Miri's fine. So rather than giving +2/+2 for each prince or princess that you've tripled, you instead get +1/+2. Health is better than attack. I think this would be better than +2/+1. It does mean that you're a little bit less likely to get that huge power spike you often did, kind of early tier 4, late tier 3. You get your Cinderella and your tripled 2-drops or whatever, a very normal Miri game. And you suddenly go from losing to my board is completely unassailable and I'm dealing 12 damage to every opponent. That definitely doesn't happen anymore. You still probably win those fights, but you're no longer just killing everyone because none of your units can die anymore. I think this is a relatively good change for Miri. Miri is a very linear hero. It is problematic when one of the best heroes in the game is very, very low skill. Just take every royal and roll is not the hero, the playstyle we want to be rewarding necessarily. As much fun as I had not having to think about it. Yeah, probably
Agreed.
a good change. Not nerfed into the ground, still playable.
Yeah, I like Miri. I've played Miri a couple of times on this patch. I finally didn't make top 4 as Miri. It was brutal. And I found it's much more reliant on Prince Arthur than it was before. Previously, you could build a Miri comp and just be all in on some Romeos and Juliets, never see an Arthur, and still come third. These days, you need that additional kick of scaling, or else you'll just be outcompeted out of the lobby. You're also not dealing as much damage to the people when you beat them. Like you're tying a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of, we were saying we think the early game meta has slowed down a little bit, and I think that is part of it, is that some of these heroes that had these early game power spikes are now, they're still stronger than you, they're still winning the fights, but they're no longer, oh, I didn't kill any of their units, oh god, kind of strong.
Also on the nerfing block is Galahad. They've replaced +2/+1 with +1/+1, so now your treasures just make your team slightly bigger.
This is a much bigger nerf than with Miri, as weird as that feels to say, given that they both just lost 1 power, but I think Galahad is bad now.
That's a huge swing. He was in your top 10 last week.
Yeah, I would not put him there, that's for sure. So Galahad, compared to Miri, they both they got bonus stats whenever they finished a treasure, but Galahad could take units that scaled well with +2/+1. I was actively pursuing unicorns and ranged units more than I was pursuing just random idiots.
Yeah.
And now, like square stats, it's harder to make good use of that. My unicorn with +1/+1 is good, but I really wanted to have the units that gained a lot from power. Happy Little Tree in particular was a good Galahad unit and is fine, but god, I wish it had so much more power relative to its base stats.
The one Galahad game I had go well was a copycat game where I was getting those stats onto Friendly Spirits and Wombats, so that I was getting those stats 2 to 3 times per combat.
Sure.
Obviously, still would have been better with +2/+1, but you really need to be getting value out of those stats. +1/+1 to the team is just not enough.
Yeah, and you definitely didn't need to worry that hard on Galahad. Yes, I was picking units to benefit more from scaling, but you could just, if you tripled 3 things before tier 4, not an completely doable, again, especially if you have Cinderella, you're unbelievably strong in an unassailable way, and it's just not as true. I think Galahad has really, really been hurt by this, in a way that again, contributes to this slightly softer early game. I think it's okay. He will be missed, but I'm not picking him.
Speaking of soft early games, Skip now starts the game with 2 extra XP instead of 3, but you still take the first turn off. What does this mean?
Unfortunately, this takes away the biggest, like one of the biggest skill decisions in Skip, which is whether or not to lock the first shop. I thought that was a really interesting learning point when I was getting good at the game, is kind of creating my own list of, would I lock this shop, would I not lock this shop as Skip? Am I willing to take something like a Trojan Donkey that is not actually that good a unit, but can get you there? Or am I willing to risk that I roll a shop of all 2-drops? I really liked that decision on Skip, and now I can't imagine a shop of 2-drops I would lock.
Now it's just completely random. It's just ONG what's in the first shop where you've got mana to spend.
So yeah, that decision point is a shame. The hero's a lot weaker, definitely, just by a huge margin. Like, you're still tier 3 at the same time, but you're tier 4 a turn slower. You're tier 6 a turn later. Skip is a lot worse. Even with a slowed down early game, Skip has not recovered to me. He's out of S tier. He's probably still fine. I don't think he's Galahad levels of crippled forever, but I'm not high on Skip anymore.
Yeah, I don't have a good enough sense of all the heroes to know where S tier ends and A tier begins anymore. Partly because S tier just got gutted by this update.
My S tier ends after Pied Piper, where it starts. But
Oh, I think you'll have Apocalypse there in a week's time.
sure.
I think Skip. I've played Skip twice since the update. I've been fairly pleased. More pleased than I ever was before with buying XP as Skip. Like when you get to level 5 ahead of everybody else, and you've got some Sirens or whatever, or some Cupids at a stage of the game that are actually really good. Everyone's units are just 1-for-1s, and you're getting those 2-for-1s. And then you can just buy at the end and heal back some of that health that you lost in the early game, and then you're still level 6, massively ahead of the lobby.
I also want to mention that the removal of Wretched Mummy hurt Skip quite a lot. Like, that was the change to Wretched Mummy. It's no longer this, when you hit tier 5, there is a unit that actually cleans your opponent's entire board, and so you are stabilized instantly. That doesn't exist. There isn't a tier 5 unit that hard stabilizes you. Nyans and Sirens are well above the stats of tier 4. They don't win a fight on their own. So yeah, that also really hurts Skip.
Yeah, but shockingly, the nerfs have made a lot of things worse. Next up, we've got a hero that wasn't literally nerfed, but was functionally nerfed. So this is Mask.
Yeah, so Mask no longer gains HP when you turn into a hero that starts with more HP. This became a necessary change because they added like 4 new heroes that start with more than 40 HP, and it would have made Mask even more unbelievable to have that range of options. It also affects the spell. It was all a dream, so if anyone else gets to level 6 and decides to change hero, they can't get that 10 HP buff, which was certainly the main way that Grandmother saw any play. It was a good thing to dream into. Still is a fine thing to dream into, but this hurts Mask. It's not a huge deal. Like, you've lost one of your good targets in Grandmother. None of the hero changes have been good for you. You can't turn into this Miriam Galahad that were like, Galahad in particular, that was a really good mid-game power spike. It's way worse.
Turning into Skip is still good. It's not as good as it was.
Yeah, and actually Skip not being picked as often is actually fairly good for Mask. You used to have every lobby had Skip most of the time, so it was hard to dream into Skip. No longer true. Still, I don't think Mask has got significantly worse. I'm picking him lower than I was, and my stats say he's really I've not done well on Mask this week for what it's worth. Yeah, I don't think it was too bad.
I haven't played Mask at all this week. I was looking for any excuse to drop Mask. This hasn't changed the amount that I cast It Was All a Dream on 6, though. I'm still dreaming a lot on 6.
Yeah, I don't think it should change it that much. It was really frustrating sometimes when you were in that kind of top 2 situation where your opponent suddenly gets 10 HP off a spell and gets to play a full round of combat. That was really frustrating. Sometimes if it was, a bunch of, you're 60% to win, they're 40% to win, they get an extra shot at it, that hurts. I'm kind of glad that's gone.
Yes, definitely. Next up we have Loki. Now, I'm not going to read the full list of changes for Loki because it's kind of its own Wikipedia entry. But the fundamental change to Loki and Genie's Wish, that's the 1-mana spell that casts a random spell, and Loki, as we know, casts a random spell at the start of each round. The random spells can now target your units. There's a curated list of things like the +3/+3 for a round, or the worm root +3/+3 to a monster forever, or Merlin's test, another one which can target anything. If you've got a monster or a good unit, if it needs to target a good unit, an evil unit, if it needs to target an evil unit, then you can cast one of those on a unit it matches, chosen at random. What does this change mean for Loki?
It's definitely a nerf. That's why we put it in the nerf section for Loki. Fundamentally, there were only like 5 spells on tier 2 that Loki could cast, of which 3 were huge economy bonuses. You know, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo and Shrink Spell in particular were like extremely strong when you got them on any of the tier 2 turns. Forbidden Fruit, worse, certainly doesn't do anything on turn 1, but is still an economy advantage, especially on the second turn of the game. And for Glory, if you've already had one of these economy spells so you're ahead, you could get a ton more units. Now, if you get something like Magic Research or Sugar and Spice, these are much smaller bonuses than the economy bonus. Loki is weaker in that stage of the game as a result. Another really rough to face opponent in tier 2 and early tier 3 that just isn't anymore.
And we're no longer taking 10 damage off them, which is lovely.
Yes, absolutely. The times you fought 7 units on 2.2 and just like, oh my god, this hurts so much. That feels bad has really gone. The main thing to think about is making sure you are curating the targets you have available. You should be trying to hold units less frequently as Loki. You know, if you've got a random Minotaur that you can't imagine ever putting back in, just sell it. Like, if it gets targeted, you're gonna be upset. And you should be considering that sort of thing when you're making your decisions. Also worth noting, these curated list of spells can't transform your unit, so there's no Shard of the Ice Queen, there's no True Love's Kiss, so your unit can never just become something at random. But it can be Beauty's influenced or Evil Twinned, messing with its alignment. So you want to be a little bit careful being too reliant on, in particular, if you're full Pumpkin comp, having one of your units suddenly become good can really just make it non-viable for your composition, and you should at least consider being aware of that, I guess. Don't make too many decisions based on it, but it is a thing. And similarly, there's a small chance that Evil Twin can wreck you. If you've got 2 good aligned court wizards, for example, having one of those Evil Twinned is disastrous. You combine them, they're evil now, just game-endingly terrible.
Yeah, that sounds gross.
Mostly, as Loki, you take your hits. More relevantly, sometimes on tier 6 you just cast random Genie's Wishes because they're free or whatever. Be aware that they can ruin you.
In the same way that they used to be able to cast a Mixed Whistle and end your game.
Yes, many patches ago.
Back 2 Mixed Whistles ago. It's interesting that this affects random spells from Loki and Genie's Wish, but not from Book of Merlin or Monster Book or Deck of Many Things. I guess that's because those are during combat, not during your turn.
Yes, I think that is the reason why, is that targeted spells targeting the units in your hand as well as everything else. I think it might be a little strong if it could also target, like, again, Wormroot is actually a really, really strong spell to get at random. That might, I don't know what exactly that would do, but
This has definitely changed how much I pick Loki. I think this should have changed how much I took Genie's Wish way sooner than it did.
Yes.
Like, I tend to take Genie's Wishes a lot in the early game. They're great for flipping Cinderellas. They're great for getting some stats onto a Wizard's Familiar. And often they're great for being 1 mana you gain some XP. Like, certainly in the old world, that was way more true. These days, they tend to be 1 mana, congratulations, you gave something +1/+1.
Yeah, I'm definitely less likely to lock Genie's Wish on turn 1, because when it casts Magic Research, that's terrible. Whereas it used to be a good percentage of the time, Shrink Spell, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, way ahead.
Then we've got 2 spells that have been nerfed. Cat's Call, which remains the same, it's just now a tier 4 rather than a tier 3.
Yep, great change. Cat's Call was mostly a really horrible Punisher card. Like, not only, like, spells that affect the combat should win you the fights a decent amount of time, especially if you're spending 2 gold at that stage of the game. That should win you a fight. But what it did is deal 4 damage to my opponent quite often, which was a really, extremely feels bad, and you know, especially Ivella was the classic, but anyone who has an Evil Queen, you cannot beat them when they cast Cat's Call. It was horrible. And I like moving it to tier 4. It still lets you do that, but you have to have actually committed to Evil Queens or Pumpkins or Hippos or whatever. You're not just taking it because you have a single Mim, so these 4 cats are game-ending levels of stats. A good change, not huge though.
Final nerf is to Mixwizzle, our old favourite, which went from 1 mana transform a creature into a random creature one tier higher than your hero into just being a 1 turn long kiss. So it's now 1 tier higher than the creature was until the end of turn, but it's now a cantrip, so you can cast Mixwizzle along with another leveled spell on that turn.
Yeah, the main thing this did, like, it was way too good. We talked about that a lot in my tournament recap, but Mixwizzle was busted, for sure. What it does now is it's mostly a reward for hats. If you have any spell cost reduction, basically all the cantrips are any spell that you can cast for 0 that does something to your board, generally improving it, and doesn't cost you any mana, that's really powerful. You're also much more likely to be able to Mixwizzle plus Kiss in the same turn, which remains an extremely strong thing to be doing. An interaction in particular worth mentioning, if you Mixwizzle and then Knighthood, perhaps as Gwen, you do get to keep the transformed character, because it has transformed a second time by Knighthooding, which is actually a really cool interaction, definitely worth mentioning as Gwen.
That's going to be the thing that I take home to try and do in the next week. Is I'm going to be Gwen and I'm going to be casting a lot of Mixwizzles.
Yeah, a good change to a spell that was extremely busted. It's still good. You should still, maybe hold on to that Nyan that you've paired up, because Mixwizzling it into a 6-drop is still really, really strong. But I'm no longer holding Cinderella for the whole game, hoping to Mixwizzle her into a 6-drop at the end of the game, because, yeah, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Cool, so that is all of the nerfs. Now, there have been a lot more buffs than nerfs in this patch. Overall, the game is getting more powerful. They're pumping up the lower tier units to set them closer to par. We're going to start with a number of lateral changes. So these are changes to cards, to characters and heroes. They're not necessarily buffs, though I think we think they're probably all buffs.
Yeah.
So opening things up with Cursed King. So Cursed King used to be flat. You take 1 damage every round, unless it would kill you, but you get 1 extra gold every round. Now it's you get 1 extra gold every round, but you take 3 damage unless you cast a spell. Have you had a go with the new Cursed King yet?
Yeah, I have. This is the one lateral change that I think that might actually be enough. You're basically Loki. Is the secret text on Cursed King. You get an extra gold, and you have to spend it on a spell every turn. So you just often buy the first spell you see. Not always. You do have a little bit more nuance than that. You also don't get to save 3 gold or 4 gold when you find an XP spell. And you can, of course, not cast that spell and take 3 damage, but 3 damage is a lot of damage. It really, really hurts. And if you're in that unlikely but possible situation that you can't cast a spell on turn 1 because you're offered a spell that can only target a unit of an alignment that you're not offered, so you're offered, you buy a good unit and you're offered Witches, you see a shop with no evil units and you see Witch's Brew, you buy a unit, you roll, you don't find a 0, there's nothing you can do about that. You're just taking 3 damage. That's really unfortunate. Nothing you can do about it, and it hurts a lot.
It's the equivalent of losing the first fight, and then you might also just lose the first fight.
Yes. I think overall, you're taking less damage. By the time you'd often take 12 damage off Cursed King. I think you're going to struggle to find 4 turns where you're not casting a spell. But it's not great. It's not, I'm not picking Cursed King highly. I think it's still very cursed.
I think the additional decision points of Cursed King are now really interesting, of when you might want to not cast a spell, or when you might, which spell you want to cast, or whether you want to roll looking for a better one or a cheaper one. I also think it's another hero and another change in this patch that really supports Hatball and the idea of mages. Like, Cursed King, you really want Merlin's Hat. You really want Moonsong Horn. I don't want a hero that's going linearly in on that, but I think Cursed King's a lot better at a mage's comp than Loki is.
Yes, I mean, that's definitely true. Loki isn't actually a very good mage's hero because you can't take the mage treasures. Yes, you should maybe certainly be more aware of Hat and Moonsong Horn. Crystal Ball doesn't actually help with his hero power at all. But not huge on Cursed King.
Next up is Beauty. This is one of the weirder changes on the list. So, Beauty used to make all your monsters good and give them +2/+2. Beauty now makes all the evil characters good, and your abilities that affect evil characters affect good characters. How does that play out?
Yeah, so the devs have said that they will eventually get dynamic text, and that what this is doing is replacing all copies of the word evil with the word good. That's the best way to think about it in your head. Just all copies of the word evil are the word good. That's how your units function. It doesn't quite. The one exception to that is Pumpkin, which will still summon units that were evil before that. But generally speaking, just everything that was evil is good. Good units affect our evil units. It's a good time. It's a really interesting hero. I've had a ton of success with it. It's my highest win rate hero this week. Average placement of 1.3 across 3 games. There's a few things you can do that are powerful, but none of them actually seem like they should be busted. So in the early game, your Minotaurs and your Unicorns affect all your units. They're really good together. They both want the stats the other one can provide, but it's not huge. Doesn't make a huge difference on tier 2. It's definitely not equivalent to stats, most of the time. Moving up to tier 3, the supports are both excellent units. The +3/+2 to evil units and the +2/+3 to good units. Evil units tend to want toughness more and good units tend to want power more. It's actually, Princess Peep benefits a ton from +3/+2 more than she does from +2/+3, and she really wants the support. So that's a kind of natural synergy. But the power spike on tier 3 is Evil Queen. If you get Evil Queen plus Princess Peep, you're not going to lose a fight until the end of tier 4. Evil Queen is a really powerful unit that suffers because evil units on those tiers are kind of bad. And yeah, she just gets way, way strong, way stronger when she can benefit from the good units. The friendly spirits and I guess that's tier 4, but the brave princesses and the princess peeps and the white stags. These are some of the best tier 3 units. She gets to benefit from those. That's a big power spike. That's the main thing I'm trying to do on tier 3 as Beauty, is find this evil queen and then find things like Princess Peep and just be powerful.
Evil Queen's not reliant on having a bunch of cats. And you can't even cat call for a bunch of cats anymore. You need to naturally find some cats.
Yeah. There's not much to do in the mid-game after that, though, which is a little rough. So if you don't find that, there isn't really another direction to go. The only unit on tier 4 that cares at all is Godmother, and she's not great. She's fine. I'm taking Godmother on Beauty often, but that really is I think that is the literal only good or evil payoff in that entire tier. It literally is. So there isn't much to do on tier 4 that you're really making good use of your hero power. And on tier 5, similarly, it's just Shoulder Fairies. Shoulder Fairies is sweet. The ability on Shoulder Fairies to fully copy the stats on any of your units. If you have one big 30/30, great, you've now got 2 of them. You don't have to worry about making them different alignments. But if you don't have a big unit, Shoulder Fairies isn't saving you.
No.
And the fact it isn't good or evil itself means it doesn't slot that well into the rest of the things you're doing.
No, it's not getting the benefit of many of these supports. It doesn't help with the Evil Queen if she's hanging around and golden.
So yeah, Beauty has this early power spike, a rough late mid game, but your end game, oh baby. This is where most of the archetypal payoffs lie. The big ones, Good Boy and Pumpkin King. They're really good together, in a way that is kind of non-obvious, but is really, really strong. They both benefit a ton from supports. A Grumble Gore gives your Good Boy's attack and is good now, but also buffs all the units that come out of a Pumpkin King.
And it's range, so it's getting the good stats off of the Good Boy, so it's exactly what you want in that position.
Yeah. You often want to put Grumble Gore behind Good Boy, even if you're not both good and evil, and now you get to do that for free. And yeah, Pumpkin King is a really strong thing. Earlier today, I had Pumpkin King with an upgraded Godmother, and you know what? That was great. It was just extremely strong, a really tanky units coming out of my Pumpkin King, and that was great.
I really like that Beauty enables complete nonsense comps that would never be possible with anything else. That feels like what a hero should be to me, here's a twist on the game that changes every decision you're going to make in the next 20 minutes.
Yes, for sure. And there are a few other small synergies. Beauty's influence can target any unit as just 1 mana plus 0/4. But the big ones are some treasures. Dark Contract is sick. By Friendly Spirits. They're 8/8s. Oh my god. And Ancient Sarcophagus also. Ancient Sarcophagus plus Princess Peep is, even if you don't find that Evil Queen, is game-endingly powerful.
Oh, that's nauseatingly good. I think I've lost to that.
Yeah, for sure. It also interacts with Book of Heroes, but it's not great. Like, you still have to slay enemy evil characters. And if your opponent has a Book of Heroes, they do get the stats even though your characters are good, because they count as both. An odd interaction, but worth thinking about.
But they don't get the stats from your characters that were good to begin with.
Yeah, they do.
If they kill your peep counts as evil.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Agreed.
Quickly, allow me to make the 0.1% adjustment to how powerful Book of Heroes is in my head.
Yeah. Beauty's cool. Enables a bunch of unique strategies. Check her out. I don't think my stats say she's really, really strong. I don't think she's that busted.
Next up on our lateral changes list is Potion Master. This is one of the ones you were telling me to try a week ago. Used to be, when you cast a spell, you just got +2/+2 permanently on the target of the spell. Now your shop sells an extra spell, but when you cast one directly on a character, you give it +1/+1 permanently. How have you found your Potion Master?
This is mostly an early game nerf. Like, on tier 2, certainly the big turn for Potion Master was the second turn of the game. If you found any of the targetable spells, you were way ahead in terms of stats. You almost always won that fight, unless you were very unlucky, and it was a good time. The stat buff is half as much as it was. You no longer dominate those fights at that stage of the game. But going long, you're way more able to play a non-Potion Master kind of game. I actually think I'm less likely to want to go Hatball as Potion Master, and I'm more likely to just go, here are some XP spells that I'm way more exposed to.
Really?
Yeah, because you're less. It used to be, if you got the Hatball, like when you're Hatballing, you get so many targeted spells in a turn anyway. Then the stats matter a lot, because you're just casting random, nonsense spells. It often, +1/+1 until the end of the fight or whatever. That doesn't matter. But it was actually +2/+2.
But I've had Hatball turns where I rolled 8 times without seeing a targeted spell, especially as Potion Master. As Pants, you're less likely to, but my read on this Potion Master change was this is a sacrifice in power level for an up in consistency, which is everything that I want.
Yeah, I can see that. I have liked the new Potion Master. I'm not gonna say that I haven't. It's one of my top heroes this week. I'm not convinced it's always. It is probably on the whole a buff, but it's a lateral change is a good description of it. A little more consistent, a little more open to not being Hatball.
Okay.
That's mostly what I want to highlight. As Potion Master previously, Crystal Ball was the best treasure I could possibly imagine, and that might still be true, but I'm no longer taking bad 3-drops and looking to triple them, because if I don't find Hatball, I'm dead. I think you can do other things and be still happy that you got to see so many. You see twice as many Pickamorphs in the late game. You see twice as many XP spells. You are just much more likely to find, other good things.
The thing you want to cast that round, or whatever it is.
Yep.
Next up is Geppetto. So Geppetto used to be a flat when you summon a character, give it +3/+3. And now it's when you summon a character during a brawl, give it attack and health equal to your level. So that's a nerf early, but a buff late.
It's barely even worth mentioning as a nerf early. If you manage to find a black cat, it's only getting +2/+2 rather than +3/+3. But that's the only summon on that tier.
And it's enough, right? A black cat is still going to win 90% of the tier 1 fights for you as Geppetto.
Yeah, you're less likely to face that Geppetto who found 2 black cats and they're unassailable, so you're taking 6 damage this fight. Again, a positive change for not getting murdered on tier 2. But just as likely to get murdered on tier 3, and the fact that if you buy XP spells and get ahead, you suddenly get a huge power increase. That's the big strength I found of Geppetto this patch. You buy that Princess Peep, it's just as good as it was, but now when I buy +1 XP, I'm also giving my team buffs. It also scales incredibly well into the late game. Now, pumpkins and Bearstein love the extra stats. Bearstein in particular are able to double down on how good that is.
+6/+6 is like having your own summoning portal at all times.
Yeah, I've not actually had a huge amount of success in my 2 games as him, I think I was a little too focused on assembling all the summoned units rather than actually doing the thing I'm meant to do with summons and putting good supports behind them. But I do think I've seen it in a ton of my lobbies. They're often the scary person. I do think they're strong, even if I haven't quite figured out what I'm doing with them yet.
Yeah, I'm trending above our 3.5 on my 2 games with Geppetto yet, but I've lost to them a lot. So that's it for hero laterals. Next up, we've got Fog. So this is a spell change. Fog used to be halve the attack of your opponent's ranged characters, and now it's pick one of their ranged characters at random and set its attack to 1. I've got to take on this. I think Fog is a 2-mana Pigamorph.
Yeah, and it's targeted in a way. Fog's sweet. You have to know you can't just cast it blind, which you can do with Pigmorph. You're going against a random opponent you haven't seen all match. You can cast Pigmorph to massively increase your chance of winning a fight. Fog doesn't have text against some comps, or it hits their Sporko or whatever, and it's who cares.
I think for 2 mana I'll take a 50-50 that I nerf one of their units.
Sure.
It depends
sure,
on the exact turn and what's going on. But
there are plenty of comps where the scary unit is not the ranged one. It's the Echo Wood, or they're dwarves, and it actually just doesn't have any text at all. When you know what they're playing, it is, yes, as you said, 2-mana Pigamorph that is often targeted. It really does its job much more effectively than it used to. Yeah, I think Fog's cool. I like it that it rewards matchups where you get to face the same opponent several times in a row and then get to look for the targeted spells. Ranged is a very powerful ability. It's cool that it has a bit of a downside.
yeah, I'm super pleased with Fog. I think 1 is just the worst amount of power. If it set it to 0 power, then it wouldn't have to attack, and that would sort of be okay. They've just got this big ball of toughness sat at the back of their board. It would also be way better against Cupids. But the fact that it sets it to 1, it's just they have to waste one of their attacking turns with their Robin Hood randomly shooting you for no reason, and then you get to attack again. It's great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it doesn't even suicide, so it's still there, gonna attack again. It's great how powerful it is to have your opponent have a 1 attack range unit.
Next up is Wretched Mummy. So they've changed this from a board wrath to sort of a clean 2-for-1 on tier 3. So its new text is it's a tier 3 2-1, and it has last breath, deal damage equal to my attack to a random enemy. I really like Wretched Mummy. It really wants a Nim behind it. It really wants to get that power up to 3 or 4, and that's when you're going to cleanly be able to trade with something attacking and then shoot down something else. Clean 2-for-1 on 3.0. But I've lost to it a lot, I've seen it a lot, and I like this card now.
Yeah, I do too. It was mostly used as a stabilization tool. You weren't playing it in your late game comps, but you were buying it on exactly 5.0, 5.1, and just cleanly winning fights. It was a huge reward for being ahead on XP in a way that was frustrating when you fell behind on XP and were also getting destroyed. Now it's just it's a viable unit that can stick around. It can go behind a copycat. I love on-ramps to copycat. Been doing that a lot this week. Though you have to make sure it actually has enough power if you're not supporting it. It's good with stags. It's, good unit, for sure.
I've enjoyed it with Hatball a lot, just throwing worm roots onto a Wretched Mummy. It does a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed. I say disappointed. It's better design, but it makes me sadder as a player that the gold version is double damage to one thing, not amount of damage twice. Amount of damage twice would be busted, but double damage to one thing is always just lethal.
Yeah, it was to 2 targets for a while in the beta, and it was not okay. So.
Oh, okay then. I'm glad they tried. Finally, we've got an enormous list of buffs, which are mostly just numerical changes, where they're tweaking the game slightly to make it better for everyone. We start with 4 heroes, which previously weren't that good, all of whom have gotten a life buff to how they start the game. This is Muert, Horde Dragon, Zelhua, and Mordred.
It's Muerte, for what it's worth.
Muerte?
Yes. This is good. I mean, certainly Muerte, Zelhua, and Mordred were all F-tier heroes. Great to dream into, but basically unplayable. You can't have hero powers that don't kick in for so long. Really good that they have that life buffer that lets them get away with, you know what, I'm going to lose a bunch of my fights on tier 3 because I don't have anything, but I can make up for that by being alive. Horde Dragon stands out as a hero who isn't a late game hero. Like, if you triple a Cinderella, you're already stronger. Like, it's just as late game as Galahad or Miri. Like, I don't think Horde Dragon needed that XP. I don't think they were a good hero, but they weren't this trash tier that Muerte and Zalcura and stuff were. And it's a little weird that Fates isn't on this list as a hero that is trash tier, has no early game, and could kind of use it.
That's a really good point that Fates could have made this list and didn't. Because my assumption was going to be people play Horde Dragon way more than its win rate. So they were like, oh, we want to reward the people who clearly want to play with this card. They want to be taking Horde Dragon. It reads really excitingly. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And actually making it a B or A tier hero is a great change. But people play Fates as well, so...
Yeah. Horde Dragon, I've been crushing it this week with Horde Dragon, like a 1.6 average on cross 3 games. Like, yeah, I think Horde Dragon's in a really good place as a result of this buff. I'm not sure he needed it, but it's fine. I think HP is a good way to do late game heroes. Not every hero should be good in the early game. That massively restricts your design. A hero that's a bit risk reward is a fun way of doing this. I like it. It's a little bit of complexity because you have to look both at the hero power and the HP total of the heroes, but it's not too bad.
It does make Grandmother a bit less special, but to help her feel special, she now gives +5/+5 in the late game to replace +3/+3. This is just a vanilla change as far as I'm concerned. Hasn't made me pick Grandmother more, but when you dream into her, it's even better. Or I guess the same.
Yeah, the existence of Apocalypse makes her a little sad. She's definitely a lot worse than Apocalypse because she really can't do the same thing Apocalypse does of, I don't care about my board, I'll just get to 6 and be fine. +5/+5 is a lot, but it's not, I'm defeating everyone I face. She's good. No, she's not. she's still kind of bad.
I've lost plenty of games after getting Fairy Godmother's Wand, or whatever it's called.
Exactly.
+5/+5 is not a game-winning quantity of stats. Next up, there's an enormous collection of units that have gained 1 or +1/+0, +0/+1, or +1/+1. I'm just going to go through the list now, and then we'll talk about the ones we want to talk about. So Sporko and Lady of the Lake are now both 3/3s. Sheep and Wolves Clothing is now a 2/2 that makes a 6/6. Puff Puff's now a 7/7. Lightning Dragon's now a 10/1. Ogre Princess now a 3/2. Trojan Donkey now a 2/6, Humpty Dumpty now a 7/7, and Tweedledee now a 2/3. Someone's a 3/2, or have I got that the wrong way around?
It's other way around. It's a 3/2 that someone's a 2/3. These are mostly really good changes. A bunch of these were what I would have listed as the worst units in the game. Trojan Donkey, Lady of the Lake, Sheep and Wolves Clothing were all way below par in a way that, I literally didn't see Trojan Donkey in the... It's been months since I picked a Trojan Donkey. Like, even if you had the health supports, it felt like it would win you a couple of fights and then would fall off a cliff. Like, even as Wonder Waddle, the hero that really wants tier 3 animals, I just wasn't picking it very often.
Remember when it used to summon gold units and just deal 20 damage to people all the time?
That was also bad, but yes. Yeah, I think these are mostly really good changes, bringing units that aren't seeing any play into contention without going, well, this is now the best thing, is a really good way of fixing that. Sporko and Lady of the Lake, in particular, ranged 1 attack. We just talked about how bad 1 attack ranged was. It's a waste of your time. Now they're actually units. They're worth putting a little bit of buffs into. They're worth, thinking about.
And they're a good on-ramp to mages as well. You can have them in your back row and then take that Book of Merlin and suddenly they're all 2-for-1s. Does +1/+1 make that big of a difference on Trojan Donkey?
Yes, so one of the big breakpoints is that you no longer die to Frog Princes in 1 hit, you no longer die to Minotaurs in 1 hit, and you no longer die to a Sure Shot with a Mim in 1 hit.
Sure.
All of which are extremely relevant on 3.0. Those aren't always the breakpoints, but those are common series of stats that now give you a unit where they used to give you nothing, and that is a big point. The one change I want to talk about that I really don't like is the Humpty Dumpty change. Humpty Dumpty is now unassailable. Like, if you buy it on turn 2 against someone who doesn't have a hero power, they can't die, except in the mirror. And that's not... I don't love that. Humpty Dumpty was always a risky option, where you had to buy Humpty Dumpty and kind of cross your fingers, or find a way to support it, or buff it, or, invest in it, and it was scary to invest in it, with the assumption that you're, it's going to die at some point and you're going to fall behind, but you won some fights and that was worth it. Now, it's often just, the correct choice, because it's so many stats and you can't lose, and it's really gross when it's the correct choice to buy, and you face someone else who has a Humpty Dumpty and they trade, and now you're both dead. Just have lost.
You both made the correct choice, and congratulations, you're skip without the upside.
Yeah, it's It's really rough when that happens. I also don't love, in the opposite direction, when someone... you're much more likely to face those people who have Easter egg. Easter egg used to be... You really had to be a bit of a psycho to
And
get
Easter egg is now way more powerful.
Yeah, like I had never had Easter egg, maybe once when I was specifically going for it or something, but like while playing correctly, I had never assembled Easter egg. Well, trying to play correctly. Now you see that not uncommonly in lobbies, and that is actually a really big source of feels bad when you get paired against this person who has Easter egg, hasn't had their egg cracked yet, so that's how you suddenly take 15 damage in one fight. And especially in a meta where that has happened less, Humpty Dumpty has pushed in the opposite direction in a way that has felt really unsatisfying. Like, I don't feel good when I'm doing it because I know it's temporary. I don't feel good when I face it, even when I break the eggs, because I've probably still lost the fight. Like, yeah, I cracked your egg, but I still lost. Ow. Yeah, don't love the Humpty Dumpty change. Not a mechanic I would have lent into, but it is what it is. Be aware of it. Pick Humpty Dumpty sometimes, but be prepared for sadness.
Next up, we've got 2 treasures that have just had numbers changed on them. So Book of Heroes is now giving +1/+2 when you slay stuff, and Sword of Fire and Ice is now +6 and +6 power and +6 health, rather than +5 and +5.
Yeah, I think Sword of Fire and Ice has not changed at all from this. Like, you're still picking it in the same spots. It's a little bit better. It's not... This is the same card. Who cares? Book of Heroes is a much bigger change because of the fact that you're using ideally multiple times in a turn, and it's scaling. I'm still only really picking it on, Beauty and maybe Miri, who are kind of...
I've done Book of Heroes as Miri. That can work out quite well. It's a way to get some stats onto Court Wizards as well as a different sort of Royals
it is
comp.
good on that, for sure. It's still not a high pick, but tier 2 treasures aren't high. Plenty of actually techless tier 2 treasures, so yeah, think about it more than you would. It's not exciting.
Then we've got 3 treasures with improved tempo. So we've got Summoning Portal, which has come from a tier 5 to a tier 4. Phoenix Feather, coming down from a tier 7 to a tier 6. And Pandora's Box, which is now a 1 turn, then you get a random tier 7 rather than a 2 turn.
Yeah, so Summoning Portal being tier 4 is interesting. Like, there's not... Unless you're Gruppetto, there isn't really... I guess if you're doing, like, Vulture things, you can pick it up here. But really the payoff for Summoning Portal is, like, baby bears and pumpkins, and that's still true. It's just about like you have to take it more. You have to take it speculatively most of the time.
Well, now Summoning Portal can act as an on-ramp rather than acting as a capstone, because it wasn't really powerful enough to function as a capstone. And so taking one when all you've got is a peep that's been sat around for a little bit of time, and now you can move in on some baby bears. I think that's good. I think that can work now.
It was certainly an underwhelming 5-drop most of the time. Phoenix Feather used to be tier 6 back in my day. It was the first tier 6 that moved to tier 7 that I'm aware of. I'm kind of glad it's back. Tier 7 is bloated with full of like kind of archetypal not that good cards. I'm glad to try and move that in the other direction. Phoenix Feather I think is now the best tier 6. Certainly, comp agnostic. Take it, it's great. Yeah, good card. Works especially well with things like Echo Wood, where the unit gets to sit there, or Shoulder Fairies, where the unit just gets massive, and then you get to resummon it. If you're facing someone with Phoenix Feather, consider Medusas and Rotten Apple Trees. They work real good.
Does Rotten Apple Tree do anything? I thought it was highest power.
Yeah, but the unit will still resummon with 1 health if it was the highest power unit, which is great. They've got a 300 Echo Wood. It comes back as a 301. I can beat that,
We got it covered.
And Pandora's Box, going from 2 turns to 1 turn. 2 turns was ridiculous. You were just dead. It's kind of too good at 1. Most of the tier 7s are, sometimes you get round table and it doesn't do anything. But most tier 7s are worth pivoting around and can be extremely busted, especially early.
Finally, we've got a set of spells where they've improved the numbers slightly. So Giantify and Hugify are now 1 cheaper. They both cost. That's the tier 6 spells for +10 health and +10 power, respectively. And then Stone Skin and Burning Palm, the +3 power, +3 health spells are now +4 power, +4 health at tier 4. I think you first get those.
Yes.
And Flourish, the Pumper Treant, is now +7 to the toughness of a Treant, which is the card in this list that I didn't realise had changed.
I would also agree that I had not I did not know that was a change until right now.
That is how much of an impact updating Flourish had on the meta. I double checked, it definitely is a change.
And then Blessing of Athena now costs 3 instead of 4.
Yeah.
You still won't cast it very often. These are all kind of cool changes. They're not that big unless you're hatballing. They're really big if you're hatballing. The fact that the biggest of these is that if you have the trio of Hatball Fork, you now get to double the Gigantifies and Hugifies. That is a huge increase to how good that trio in particular is. Or just, you don't need the ball at that point. Just Hat Fork is massively increased in power level.
That's a good point. I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah, no, that is really big.
I like this change for Hatball and other spell-based comps. Right, we've been recording for 1,000 years. Do you have any final thoughts about all of these changes and the patch in general? I've been really enjoying it. I've found this patch to be... Almost all the patches have been an improvement to the game. Like taking out Adventurer, like you said, massive improvement to the game. And yes, this is a flattening of power level. It's made me worse at the game. Comparatively. But overall, I think the game is in a better, stronger, healthier place because of these changes.
Yeah, it is interesting. My stats are lower, but I'm also, I'm top 100 in the game or whatever. Like, how much? I guess everyone must be slightly worse. Maybe. I've really enjoyed the changes. Almost all of them. I need to play more and figure it out more, and I'm excited to do that. But yeah, it's good.
Well, you haven't got long because at time of recording, there's a tournament coming up. This weekend is the Fall Championship, starting on the official Storybook Brawl Twitch at 10 a.m. Pacific time this Saturday, the 20th. Are you excited? Are you preparing? What's the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm certainly basically this week just going hard. I'm going to play as much as I can. Certainly more than the 6 games I played for the previous tournament. Doing my best to both play a ton of games and be in discussions and do some theory crafting and stuff. I'm excited. I think it's a really good lineup. I really like all the special invites. It's nice to see them rewarding members of the community. Often special invites for this sort of thing are given to members of other games to try and bring them in. But this has really seemed to reward the people who've been streaming, the people who've been putting a ton of time and effort in, and that's awesome to see.
Agreed, that's really nice.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't have any, particular what am I doing differently to prepare for a tournament rather than just trying to get good at the game. There are some scrims going on between the tournament competitors, but they happen to be at 3 a.m. my time, so that's not happening. Yeah, I'm just going to try and play some games, do my best, make sure... One thing I'm going to have kind of set in stone is a pick order. I do think it is possible to have a list of heroes in the order that you would pick them, because there isn't a contextual, a locked in stone tier list, because there isn't context in that setting. You can just go, I am always taking Beauty over Potion Master or whatever, because on ladder you might be bored and want to do something different. Tournament, just play your best. You should have that locked in stone.
Cool. Well, join me in wishing Sith the best of luck with that next weekend.
Yeah, if you want to have live updates from me, I will be tweeting pictures of all my final comps. There might be a delay based on the tournament coverage, but I will be tweeting all the final comps from my tournament. And I'm likely to be streaming this week. I think my plan is to stream for 3 hours between 12 and 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. UK time, so 12 to 3 GMT. Yeah, so if you want to check me out on twitch.tv/Sythesys, SYTHESYS, I'll be there.
Fantastic. We're calling that a show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro. He's Sythesys. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast, the number 7, or my co-host Matt at SYTHESYS. You can leave us a review on iTunes and tell your friends. Tell that one friend of yours who isn't quite good enough at Storybook Brawl yet. We all have one. Matt's got me. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, beauty's good. Check her out. Have a great week.